rather abrupt finish there to the interlude music here as we welcome you to the Speakeasy Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Going to be joined by Earl Smith of theopenmat.com and back at our old stomping grounds, Virginia, the Virginia Wrestling Association. We are going to talk about VAWA, Vengeance in Virginia, coming December 6th. Earl, welcome to the Speakeasy, via virtually, that is.
Thanks. It's good to be back. I hope it's much better than my last appearance. That was kind of a disaster, but
well, disaster is relative. I mean, train wrecks are disasters, but they're not really of the natural kind. So I'd like just to say that it was just simply a man-made disaster. How's that sound?
Yeah, it was me. It was on my end.
I'm gonna blame you entirely. See, we're gonna put you full screen. You are the one we are blaming. So right now, if you are watching via Rockfin, via Periscope, I'm actually dropping this out on Twitter and on my personal Facebook, just to give you a little mid-afternoon or end of the day little chatter. That's a little too much full screen on Earl there. We're still working through some of the technology, but hey, we're talking about Vengeance in Virginia. I figured it was time to rep the old alma mater, the actual alma mater that actually counts in my book, the one that has a wrestling program and has multiple state championships, that being the Fighting Bull Islanders of Poquoson High. Although, Earl, I don't know if a lot of people know this, I would have gone to Menchville had I stayed in Newport News. So I was not exactly a wrestling recruit by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm sure if I was actually any good, people would have said I was recruited to Poquoson. I guarantee you.
Yeah, and that's definitely kind of a step up in competition from Poquoson to Menchville, I'd say, especially in those times.
Well, it's kind of funny because the one Poquoson kid that will be wrestling in Vengeance in Virginia, we'll get to. The kid he's wrestling, they started out at Menchville, and their dad, Tiante Gray, wrestled at Denby. So there's some time. So what we're talking about here is coming up this weekend, Vengeance in Virginia at top of the podium, which is in Sterling. And I've seen pictures of this facility. Earl, have you been there yet? Because I've heard rave reviews about this training center.
No, and that's the same thing. I haven't been there. This will be my first time. We're going to have lots of bells and whistles. They're going to bring out smoke and lights, and we're going to have your tag team partner, Brian Hazard. He's going to be on the mic and doing the DJ. As far as, we're going to have very, very limited fans there. So there's going to be plenty of space. There's bleacher seating. There's a mezzanine. So there's going to be a lot of space for people to be safe and be able to enjoy the wrestling as well.
That's at 310 Glen Drive in Sterling, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia for those who are unaware. Top of the podium. Doors open, 12:30, 1:30 weigh-ins, 2 o'clock for spectators. 3 o'clock, we got Wrestling Starts. You already mentioned my partner in crime, Brian Hazard. But Earl, I want to know, what was the impetus behind this? Whose brainchild is this? How does Vengeance in Virginia actually get rolling?
Well, I want to say it was probably when Minnesota's #1 started. That was about the time that I kind of signed on to start helping promote and do rankings in Virginia. And I saw a lot of promos for that. And maybe it was Pennsylvania's True Power event. It was, one of the two. And through Twitter, I did like the big eyes emoji thing to Bill Swink, the state chairman. And I don't know exactly what he did, but he acknowledged it like, yeah, that's a good idea. So that was all that was said about it. And then, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, a month later, he sends me an email and says, I want to do an event. He's the athletic director at Spotsylvania High School. That was the original site of the event before it was moved to top of the podium. And he sent me maybe 8 to 10 matches based on last year's rankings. Like, this could be a cool thing. We need to do this for the kids this year. So, that's kind of how it all came together.
Yeah, and the news is coming out. We've got several cities within the state of Virginia. You still live there. I spent the first 25 years of my life there. That have shut down. I know Fluvanna was the most recent. I read that yesterday. The Flying Flucos, believe it or not. I think the only Fluvanna wrestler I could actually name outside of that story was Willie Crawford. I remember he won the state title on a broken ankle or something. That guy was a monster. Actually went to wrestle for the Apprentice School, which ironically canceled their winter sports seasons yesterday as well, or the day before. So bringing in all sorts of bad news for Virginia. But we're talking about good news. This is an event initially slated for 18. Of course, wrestlers are going to come in and out. There's things happen to kids, whether it be just contact tracing or somebody rolls an ankle, things like that. But Earl's going to fill us in on some of that stuff. But looking across the board, and admittedly not covering Virginia wrestling like I used to, not living there anymore, I'm looking at some of the names, and of course I'd mentioned Trevor Gray, his dad Deontay. I covered him in high school, and now he's got kids, and it just makes me feel so old. On the day of Britney Spears' birth, when we talk about this, she's 39. That ought to make everybody that's watching this feel old. We got kids from they're kids of people I covered. Like, Patrick Schuler's kid is wrestling in this thing too. I mean, so first things first, Earl, match-wise, what started all this stuff coming together when it came time? Swink sends you a couple matches, and how quickly does this thing take shape?
Yeah, so we sat down in a Google Meet, and we just had a list of the top kids, and he said, give me 5 kids you want to have in here. So I listed 5 guys, and then we just matched them up. And
5 guys? You mean not the bird?
No.
Oh, dude, I could totally go for 5 guys right now.
I would have. The one closest to me is temporarily closed or shut down or something, but I digress. So yeah, we had some of the guys that we just felt were essential to have in. And then as far as the matchmaking goes, there's a lot of criticism about Virginia, rightfully so. I'll do it myself when we're talking about 6 classes of public schools, 1 private. And, one of the good things in an event like this is, well, you got a 4A state champion, you got a 6A state champion, they haven't
Let's match them up. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah. So, generally we tried to keep different classes away from each other because, in a traditional season, these guys may end up meeting at the 6A state finals anyway. So let's get a matchup we're probably not going to see, or we didn't see last year in the state finals. We also tried to do the same thing geographically. Richmond's kind of a hotbed right now for the state. So we tried not to get, Richmond guys together, try to get someone from Northern Virginia, Southeastern Virginia in the mix. And, again, something you may not see in the regular season, especially now since, we're only doing duels and tries and if it's approved quads. So you're going to have a lot of these duels locally. So, yeah, trying to get kind of out of the box of where these guys are competing was important as well.
One thing I'm looking at is the number of schools. And again, I guess par for the course, we've got new schools. And I'm looking at, you got some traditional powers in there. You've got some brand new schools in there. You got schools that weren't even around. I mean, I graduated high school in 1997, so it's not like I'm a spring chicken. But I'm sitting there going through, Mountain View wasn't a thing then. Forest Park was pretty new. River Bend was brand new. Like one of my college roommates coached there for a bit. New Kent was single A and wasn't much to speak about at that time. St. Christopher's was decent, but not what they are now. And then I've just, there's Ferrum and Averett on the Division III side. Those colleges didn't have wrestling. So I want to dial in on that one a little bit. You got Levi Engelman, a Colonial Forge graduate, wrestler for Ferrum against Sam Braswell. Levi Braswell, somebody completely different. Sam Braswell from Averett, who was, All-American in terms of the NWCA, the named All-American for Division III. You got 2 Virginia schools that didn't exist when we were in high school, Earl, wrestling as a highlight college match here. So talk a little bit about what it meant to have Engelman and Braswell in this match.
Well, I think it kind of gives it a little more prestige, having the college guys there. And I think it's cool for the high school guys high school guys and girls being able to compete with Virginia natives, wrestling for Virginia schools that have went out and achieved All-American status. And, now they're wrestling back alongside these high school wrestlers. I think it's really going to be special for them. It's funny how it kind of came together. I was involved in, a lot of the matchmaking. This one in particular, I had nothing to do with. From what I understand, there was some sort of, I don't know whether it's Instagram, Facebook, some sort of challenge from one side to the other, and it just came together really fast. And, Bill just kind of called me up one day and was like, hey, we got we got a college match with these two guys, and cool, that sounds good.
So, Bill, being an athletic director and a longtime coach in the state of Virginia, I'm guessing he's got. I mean, we don't have the compliance like we do in college, but what is it? To your knowledge, what did it take to get these things to be allowed? I mean, this is technically the season doesn't start. You know, it would have started this weekend under normal circumstances, but why? How are we able to have a high school? I guess the first question too: we going folk style? We going freestyle? What are we doing here?
Yeah, it's going to be a folk style, and the date was picked out with that in mind, with being able to do it at Spotsylvania High School, which he's the athletic director at. So, that's kind of why it was picked there. But again, we kind of pivoted maybe a month, 3 weeks ago, and saw that doing something in the school, it's not going to be a good idea with the way things are. So yeah, it's all outside of the school as far as arranging all of this.
One thing I like, you talked about the variety of schools. As I go through, and of course, Grassfield was another one that wasn't built. Like Rural Retreat. I mean, holy Daniel Crockett, Batman. Like that's. I mean, I'm thinking about what it's like back in the day. I mean, Rural Retreat has been, a real small school power for a while, but you've got them involved. Then there's also the girls' matches involved. Explain what it's like to get. We don't yet have girls wrestling sanctioned in Virginia. It's one of those targets that Wrestle Like a Girl in the NWCA and USA Wrestling have. But getting the girls involved, how important was that for you and everybody at Bawa?
Yeah, I mean that was from day one with our initial discussions. That was something we needed to have and we want to have. And again, because wrestling's not sanctioned in the state of Virginia, these girls don't get the exposure they should. So they need to be on an event like this so they can get their names out there. And looking at the credentials of some of them, you mentioned Charlie Schuler. She's an excellent sophomore. Her opponent, Brianna Ta of Thomas Jefferson, she was a 5A state qualifier, won 2 matches last year, and was a match away from getting onto the podium. So she's one that your college coaches out there probably should be looking at.
Yeah, I've got a hunch they are because, even though we don't have wrestling sanctioned in Virginia, there's still plenty of girls that have come through and then that have wrestled in Fargo and then have gone on to wrestle within the WCWA. And now we've got the NAI and NCAA wrestling programs starting to work for championships of their own. Of course, we know the NAIA with the Invitational, the Women's Collegiate Wrestling Coalition with the NCAA schools. So it's an alphabet soup, if you will, for girls wrestling. A lot of opportunities. And Earl, what have you seen? I mean, you spent time coaching before your time in the media. You wrestled at Manassas Park, a single A school at the time, back when we had a more realistic 3-class public school system. But just from where you sit and, covering wrestling and talking on the forums, the old single A wrestling zone with Scott Tucker back in the day to where we're at now, where have you seen Virginia wrestling as a whole? Where do you think we, and I say we as a native, can improve? And how is an event like this going to help us improve?
Well, yeah, if you're talking about, the days where I was coaching, probably 2005, 2007, that was right as, the Kevin Dressers were leaving Christiansburg, Steve Martin, Great Bridge. So there was a lot of carryover. Those powerhouse teams kind of carried the state. There was a lot of college wrestlers that came from Virginia because of those. And, quite frankly, if you look at the Super 32, the production wasn't great this year at the high school level. Now, if you look at the middle school level, there were a lot of talented kids from Virginia that got onto the podium. If you look at our friend Willie at Matt Scouts, he put out middle school rankings earlier this week, and there were a bunch of Virginia kids on there. So, I'm hoping we're on the upswing. Something that I've noticed over the years, especially since they went to this 6-class system, I've talked to college coaches out of the state, and they're kind of saying, what's a 5A state runner-up mean? What's a 3A state champion? Which one's better? Well, kind of in our old system, you knew generally the AAA state champion, maybe the top three kids in AAA were generally your top kids. You know, you'd have Grundy, Christiansburg, Pocosin kind of in the mix, but generally there was an order of how things went if you're recruiting. And so, you know, I've had coaches tell me they just don't even bother with Virginia because it's not worth their time to investigate what all these things mean. So, you know, I would like to change that and have an event like this where, you know, we're able to say, these are the kids, these are the credentials, you know, they're competing against another top kid, you know, give them a look.
It is kind of cool. I now brought up the name of the schools again. I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to center on Evan Rawls from Nansemond River right now. And back in the day, Nansemond River was double A in the Bay Rivers District. Then my senior year, they moved to triple A. So Damon Hill was one of the first big guys that came out of Nansemond River, was third as a sophomore at Nansemond River in double A. Then they go triple A. He wins the state title, gets hurt his senior year. And then it's almost like, I don't know how many years, almost 20 years went by before they had another state champion. And, you know, Trip Seed has been there for a while, really got things rolling in Suffolk. Nansemond River's in Suffolk, for those who don't know. And, you know, to see a Nansemond River, to see, you know, Centerville's always been pretty solid up north, but I mean, to see teams that were a thing 20 years ago, it's kind of giving me the feels of nostalgia. But, you know, what's it mean to have a Nansemond River in there, to have a Benedictine and a St. Chris from the private schools, which again, when we were coming through, really weren't a factor, and colleges really weren't giving those kids looks.
Yeah, I mean, I love to see kind of both things you're saying, the changing of the guard, but at the same time, you know, we just added a kid from Robinson, and you know, this entire time we're talking about Robinson has been, you know, consistently one of the best schools in the state. You know, shout out to Brian Hazard. But yeah, Nansemond River, you're having, you know, they legitimately had 3 or 4 kids that probably could have been in this event, you know, aside from Evan. And you know, one thing I liked was trying to showcase all of the different teams. If you're including the private schools, I think we have 5 of the 7 state championship teams represented. We couldn't get anybody from Grundy, and we actually had somebody from Fauquier, but that ended up falling through. So we had a bunch of these state championship teams represented, which I like.
Now, one thing that jumps out at me off the page is this Jesse Alvarado Zane Cox match. That's one that's like, I don't follow it as much as I should, but I'm looking through the lineup. Okay, know that kid, know Raglan, know this, know the New Kent kids, know some of the kids from the peninsula, but I'm just like, wait a minute. Okay, Alvarado Cox just leapt off the page at me.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the, as far as I'm concerned, one of the headline matches there. You know, Alvarado, he was a state champion at 45 last year for Great Bridge. He placed at Escape the Rock. You got Cox. He was a state champion on the private school level, national prep placer. I believe he was 4th. He's a junior, one of the top juniors in the state. Alvarado is probably top 2 or 3 seniors in the state. So, you know, yeah, that's one with kids with national level credentials. You know, both probably wrestling in D1. You know, between that and the match you mentioned with Gray and Smith, you know, I think those are probably 2 of the biggest for me.
Now, I'm going to bring it back to programs and things that were not there when I left. And John Tanaka was a senior. Him and I graduated the same year in high school. He was at Tab. I was at Pocosin, and he has built programs wherever he's been. He was the first coach at Nottoway when they started a program, when they were still back at the old AA Region 1. Spent time at Varina, really had some success there. And at Powhatan. Powhatan's become, they were a single A school. They were a football powerhouse. Now they're you could say that they're a bit of a wrestling factory too. And they were a high school when I was coming through, but now they didn't have a program. Now they do. And again, I just want to focus on, it's just some fresh schools in there giving us different looks. And if you've lived in Virginia for the last 15 years, you're probably looking at me going, what are you talking about? They've been around for a while. No, they weren't. So there's that hope that I'm going to, put the cart way ahead of the horse, is if, you can get events. It can take 1 or 2 kids to build a team, to go to Fargo, to I even threw Tanaka's name out over to Sparks during the Big Ten Network when Colin Girardi's out there wrestling for Virginia Tech against Ohio State. So, anytime we can get those type of Virginia things in there, and, it goes back to, what we've got, and Tanaka was on one of the teams, the last teams at Longwood College, which moved to Division One drop wrestling. We're seeing that with my alma mater. It's eventually going to have an impact on the state in terms of the teachers and coaches. So what we need to do right now is support programs. This is the segue, Earl. I know you're waiting to see where I'm going with Ferrum and Averett,
Yeah.
Emory and Henry, Nate Yetzer at Roanoke College. We got a new program up at Shenandoah. We've got Bluefield and the NAIA, so we've got a lot more college programs where we can now take those kids and get them in your wrestling room. So high school coaches, look around, and if you're not in this, look around and be like, okay, where are these kids coming? Are they going to be teachers? Let's see if we can find them a teaching job. If they're coming off the mats as a Division III qualifier or something at Ferrum. Emory and Henry just announced they were going to move to Division II, which will give us a Division II school in the state for the first time since Longwood dropped. We're having the ability to use these Division III programs, not just to get the kids that are going to be like in this match to go there, but then to turn around and come back and coach our kids. So this is my mini soapbox about, why Pennsylvania is so good. All their studs come back and coach and teach high school. So we're getting a lot of those opportunities to wrestle in college and then, go on to be teachers and coaches. So that's why it's so important that we have the Ferrums, the Averetts, the Emory Henrys, the Shenandoahs. I'm leaving schools out. I don't mean to be, because they're just adding so quickly. We just need to get a Christopher Newport or a Virginia Wesleyan on board down by the beach so we can pick things up where ODU dropped the ball, to be quite honest with you. So, just basically pissed all over the wrestling community down there. I won't get on that soapbox much anymore. Back to this event, Earl. Streaming track wrestling. A lot of players when it comes to streaming now. Why did VAWA go with track wrestling?
To be honest, that was one that Bill had set up even before we actually talked to me about it. So, but VAWA has went with track wrestling for a while. They're consistent. They love the tournament software, the weight management system. So that's been a long running partnership for VAWA.
All the information on this, of course, as we know, at virginiawrestling.com, which again is a throwback because that was Bill Swink's old website, the old Virginia Wrestling Roundup, back when Matt Talk was like users.com. I'm not going to give you the address, but me and Bill setting the two websites back 20 some years ago, and then Virginia Wrestling, again, the home for Virginia Wrestling Association. And Earl, what are some other things that we've got with this event that you're looking forward to? Not just the matchups, not just, we've got an opportunity to have some wrestling in Virginia, but anything on the, ancillary or tertiary or tangential. I'm throwing all the names of words, big words. I've been borrowing Willie's thesaurus. Anything about this event that's not being talked about that you really want to focus on too?
Well, it's funny. We talked, Bill and I did yesterday, trying to tighten up some loose ends and stuff like that. And, with the way the season is heading, or just the uncertainty, the weirdness we've got going on, we're already kind of tossing out ideas for, maybe we could do this in the future. Maybe, this could be an annual event, but we could also do X and Y. And so I think it's going to lead to a lot of cool events from, for Virginia wrestlers.
All right, Earl, we were going to plan. We weren't planning on doing a whole full blown out show about this. It was like, hey, what can we do? But ultimately I was like, no, let's bring Earl on. And while we've got Earl on, what's your take on what's going on? Not just in Virginia right now. I mean, we got different school districts shutting down. I know friends back home have said, all right, well, they're not the high school level yet, but with parents working distance, some kids are now private schools that are still open. I mean, who's wrestling, or Michigan's wearing masks, for goodness sake. I mean, what's the pulse like for a state that, sadly, despite our great leadership with our state chapters, our state associations have kind of dropped the ball and been uninformed on a variety of things in the past. What are some things that are good? What are things are some bad that we need to fix in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Yeah, I think it's going to be weird to see how this fallout goes. Because, for instance, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 high-level state place winners for public schools that are trying to get into private schools right now. And I know of a couple kids that have already went from the public to privates. So, I wonder if that's going to be a bigger thing going forward. And you mentioned the area by area. Some of the kids couldn't wrestle or declined to wrestle in this event because their school had shut down their wrestling room. And some pockets of the state, you have clubs with their dedicated standalone facilities and they're taking precautions, but they're operating in a semi-normal manner. Other places, I think a lot of it maybe in Fairfax County, these clubs are based out of the high school and they just can't do anything right now. So there were kids that were interested in it that were like, I haven't wrestled much, I'm not ready for a big event like this. So that that's kind of unfortunate that the kids have kind of been let down like this. And for those not familiar with geography, the northern part of Virginia, you're, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Pennsylvania. So there have been a lot of people that have gone up to Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania's had a lot of dual events this fall and stuff. So they have been wrestling, but just not doing it in Virginia.
Yeah, and I know from experience, like, yeah, I don't want to bring up tragedies to provide any context, but there's a situation where Northern Virginia typically tends to shut down around things a little quicker than the rest of the state. Back when there was the issue with the sniper, it was like, okay, teams from Northern Virginia couldn't go to the Beast of the East. They could not go north of Montgomery County, Maryland. They could go south. So there are some situations like that some school districts and municipalities do treat things differently. We've talked about Fluvanna. I still don't know what Pocoson's doing, my hometown. I don't know what Newport News is doing. I know what Henrico's doing. We've seen that. We don't know what our little pockets of wrestling are doing. So it really, the trickle down effect actually trickles up because you've got, Tony Roby at Virginia Tech can't recruit. They're, the dead period. So even our Virginia kids that want to wrestle, they can't even do visits, really, official visits right now. So it affects that senior class that can't get recruited right now. It affects the class that's coming in, the freshman class that lost their year a lot of places and lost the eligibility. So I mean, it's instead of a trickle down, it is a trickle down, but it's also a trickle up when it talks about going our Virginia kids going from high school to college, and then those college coaches just trying to pick them up.
Yeah, and I mean, like the Powerade as of now is supposed to go on. They have a different location, but it's again sort of business as usual. And there are a bunch of Virginia schools that would travel up there on a regular basis, and Virginia's barred from going out of state at the high school level and having out of state teams come in for events. I know another one was New Kent was supposed to go down to Florida for the Knockout Christmas Classic, and that's another one that's going to have to go by the wayside as far as our guys going down there. So it is unfortunate because we talked about it earlier. Virginia, we're still trying to improve and get back to where we were and surpass maybe where we were 10, 15 years ago. But coaches are not going to know what to think when there's 3 or 4 duels on your schedule and then a 8-man state tournament bracket. So it's unfortunate that they're losing out on the potential exposure at Escape the Rock or Beast or some of the other events.
Or even in Hampton at the Virginia Duels, which 2 weeks ago we had to cancel. I still have my association with the Peninsula Wrestling Association, and that was something that the club was going to hold out until after Thanksgiving to make a decision. Well, that decision got made for him. Hampton Coliseum, apparently, from what I hear, has been a ghost town since this. And I talked to a friend of mine that used to work at Madison Square Garden in New York City, also been a ghost town. So it's not just one place. I mean, you can't just move it across the street to the convention center, which was looked at, but then came the reduction in total number of people that are allowed in these facilities. So in a lot of ways, the PWA's hands were tied in terms of Virginia Duels. I honestly thought, and me and Mike McCormick were having just some discussions about, well, it's with the spectators the way they are, we could have pocketed people up in the stands and probably distanced pretty well. It wouldn't have been a zoo underneath, save the host school and the line for the hospitality room. But I mean, we lost to Virginia Duels, so that right there was an opportunity for college teams to come in and look at our kids. Especially with the more D2 and D3 teams that are in that American college division, they're plucking that American division, they're plucking that black and blue division. So I mean, it's not just our teams going out of state; it's our in-state events that drew teams from out of town. And I knew that Nazareth up in District 11 in Pennsylvania when they set their schedule, and their schedule that weekend had like I think Bethlehem Catholic and somebody else on a home and home, and it was like, well, we know they're not coming, so the first time in 40 years the Virginia Duels will not be held, and that's a sad one for me because that's when I get to come home. That is my Christmas.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate, and I don't know. I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole with you about this, as far as getting into political discussions. But I think
I
there's
don't do politics, Earl. You don't got to worry about that. You don't got to worry about that.
Yeah, but I guess there's a lot of unforeseen consequences by some of these actions.
Here's the thing. I don't get to talk about Virginia wrestling enough on this show, so that's where I'm opening up all the cans of things. I'll pop a top on that one, which is what I usually do at the Virginia Duels. Now, bringing it back to center, Vengeance in Virginia, December 6th. It happens to be on my dad Grover's birthday, so that's kind of cool. He's not a wrestling guy, don't worry. December 6th, top of the podium, 310 Glen Drive, Sterling, Virginia. Tickets available at $10. And it's a rotating thing. You can come in. It's not like you're just going to sit there and stand and crowd the mats the whole time. There's rotating in. You're going to be stopping for washing mats and things like that. So it's going to be, if you can't make it up there, and Sterling is a hike for, once you get to Northern Virginia, it depends on the traffic, because it can take you 20 minutes to get there. It can take you 2 hours, depending on who knows how to use HOV lanes and zipper merge correctly. But trackwrestling.com, if you can't see it, all the information at virginiawrestling.com. 3 p.m. the first whistle. Earl, while we got you, anything else you want to add about the event?
No, and I just want to say, because of local guidelines, the competitors will be restricted to 2 parents, whoever, spectators that they're going to bring in. So it's not necessarily going to be open to the public. If you're invited by a wrestler, you're able to come in, and as you said, we're going to have matches, take a break, clean the mats, cycle out spectators again, so everything is compliant with the local regulations. But I'm just very excited, because this is going to be the first real event that's been in Virginia since I think March. So just being able to do something, showcase these kids. I've got a lot of feedback, positive, from the parents, from the kids. Just thanks for setting this up. Thanks. These guys have been ready to compete. It seems like it's going to be a cool event. That's what they're saying. And, I feel that way too. And again, I'm already almost focused on what we're going to do next to be able to get exposure for these kids.
Yeah, I can't wait to check it out this weekend too, because if there's wrestling around, if I'm not there, I'm definitely going to be watching it. So last thing I got to say is from my man Matt Small down at Great Bridge. Fitzhugh! It's an inside joke. He just said it. I just had to say it, because that's. I mean, if you're GOG20s, you know what I'm talking about. And that's the last inside joke of the show. So, Earl, where can they find you on social to find out what you're all doing with the open mat? Because it's something like being from Virginia. You have to work in wrestling media.
There you go. Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Earl of Tom, which is Earl of the Open Mat. I think most people tend to do like a British accent, Earl of Tom or something like that.
The Earl of Sandwich. The Earl of Easy. He is no longer Easy E of MP. He may have been that at one time, but don't try searching him out on Twitter for that.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at the match list, one of the freshmen from Benedictine, Bryson Arbogast, his father, Brett Arbogast.
Was that Brett? Okay, it was coaching Randolph Henry. I was wondering if that was if there was a relation there. Again, people we covered making us feel old with their kids wrestling.
Yeah, so he coached against me back in the Region B days. So we actually added Bryson yesterday as we were modifying the lineup, and he brought out an Easy E, and that was the first time I've heard that in a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, maybe.
Well, we bring it up all the time, but but that's how that was the old instant messenger days. Because never mind, I'm not going to bring up my old screen names plural. But I was wondering. It's like Region B was the Big Ten of Single A. Let's just call it that.
There you go.
All right, Earl, that's him chiming in. Vengeance in Virginia at virginiawrestling.com. 3 p.m. December 6th. Up at top of the podium in Sterling. Check it out if you can't see it, of course. If you're one of the few that can, but you can't. If you do, you know what I'm saying. If you can't watch it in person because of limitations, whatever, trackwrestling.com, check it out. So for Earl Smith of theopenmat.com, I'm Jason Bryant. This has been The Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Hey, I need to do my tagline, Earl. I didn't have it right. What is it? How does it go? I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me because you've always got time for Short Time. I've never done it live on a show like that. I think it was good.
It was all right.